Hello everybody, Editor Carl here once again, and today we've got a proper three-way head-to-head. The RTX 5060, RTX 5050, and Intel's Arc B580. All three sit around that £230 to £260 mark, aiming for that sweet spot 1080p gamer. But which one actually delivers the best performance, and more importantly, the best value for money? Also, a quick thanks to Overclockers UK for sending over the RTX 5050 for testing. They've got plenty of GPUs on their site, but we appreciate them helping out with this one. I've benchmarked these cards across 10 games, crunched the numbers, and we're about to find out who really comes out on top. Now, before we dive in, these tests were all done at 1080p with upscaling disabled. Yeah, you heard that right. I read the comments. I told PC Centric we'd give the people what they want. One quick note, gameplay was captured using Shadowplay for the Nvidia cards and an external capture card for the Intel GPU, since they still don't have a built-in option. But don't worry, I always do separate pass-through runs for accurate averages before recording a short gameplay clip in the same spot for comparison. So to kick things off, the first game we're taking a look at is one of the most popular games in the world. Counter-Strike 2. Of course, we've got this set to 1080p and we've chosen the high preset. FSR is disabled, no upscaling is going to be used in any of these games today. When it comes to the average frame rates in Counter-Strike 2, it's a clear win for the Nvidia GPUs. The Arc B580 trails the RTX 5050 by around 40 average FPS, with the RTX 5060 way in the lead, over 140 FPS faster than the Arc B580. Unfortunately, that is just the way it goes with Counter-Strike 2. Nvidia GPUs tend to perform really well in this title. Even compared to like an RX 9060 XT, the RTX 5060 is very competitive and even outperforms that GPU in Counter-Strike 2, even though the 5060 loses quite comfortably to the 9060 XT in a lot of other titles. If you're curious, we've got another video covering the 5060, but this time versus the 9060 XT and the 5060 Ti in another video, if you want to check that out too. Moving on to another popular multiplayer game, we have Marvel Rivals. Of course, high preset, anti-aliasing is set to TAAU. I'm not sure what the U stands for, but just make sure you've got Lumen and Nanite turned off, as this absolutely tanks your frame rates and is just not something that you can expect to run on this kind of GPU. Clearly, as you can see, when it comes to the averages, the Arc B580 and the RTX 5050 are pretty well matched, averaging 112 and 110 FPS respectively. The average 1% lows are also pretty similar, but the RTX 5060 absolutely takes the lead here with 145 FPS, making it a lot more compelling for multiplayer games where you don't need that much VRAM and you just want higher frame rates for quicker reaction times. We've said it multiple times before in multiple different videos, 8GB cards are a little bit of a scam in today's market and you really shouldn't be looking at buying them, but these kind of videos are here so that if that is all you can afford, this is what you can expect to get. It would be good if these companies would just put the right amount of VRAM into each card and not try and scam us. Next up, we have Marcus's favourite game. Mr. PC Centric himself loves a bit of Fortnite, and we've got the medium preset here. Obviously, you could set some things to epic, you could lower some other settings down to maybe fine-tune and get the perfect esports kind of settings for competitive gameplay. This is just a nice, easy way to compare things. Now, when it comes to the average frame rates, it is a big win for the Nvidia GPUs in this title. Much like we saw in Counter-Strike 2, Fortnite just runs better on Nvidia GPUs. It's the same thing compared to AMD GPUs as well. The Nvidia cards take the cake in this title. Of course, if you're looking at mainly playing Fortnite and Counter-Strike and Marvel Rivals, games like that, sometimes you could be better off just buying a cheaper Nvidia GPU to get higher frame rates. And that is clearly the case with the RTX 5050 versus the Arc B580 in these titles. But that's not always the case, and obviously if you go into some single player games as well, that is where the RTX 5050 can fall apart in comparison to the Arc B580. Case in point, the next game we have is Ghost of Tsushima. I thought it was a good idea to include this game with Ghost of Yotai just being released, and some people might have not have played the original and they want to check this one out first before jumping into that one. For this title, we've gone through the high preset across the board and it looks fantastic. Definitely a game I'd recommend checking out. Now, when it comes to the average FPS, it's once again a clear win for the RTX 5060. But not by much. The Arc B580 isn't that far behind, but what is far behind is the RTX 5050. This is where this GPU kind of falls off a bit. It's not fantastic at single player AAA games. The RTX 5050 is pretty much designed for your multiplayer, low quality kind of games. Fortnite, Marvel Rivals, Overwatch, Counter-Strike 2, that kind of stuff. Maybe some Apex Legends thrown in there as well. Where it doesn't do particularly well is single player titles, and Ghost of Tsushima is an example. I'll be completely honest, the average FPS is absolutely fine and it's definitely a smooth and playable experience, but this is where you're starting to see a bit of fall off compared to the Arc B580, especially in these single player games. But let's see how these GPUs compare in a few more single player titles right after a quick word from this video sponsor.
If you play a lot of titles and games are filling up your precious storage, then you need a wallet-friendly Ugreen NAS. Unlike cloud subscriptions that never seem to stop increasing in price, having your own NAS secures your files, lets you retain fast local access, and still maintains that go-anywhere cloud storage. With supported storage up to a whopping 120 terabytes, you can potentially store 40 million pictures or 80,000 movies, all with the ability to start small and then add more drives at a later date. The unit itself, well, it's tiny, and adding more drives couldn't be more straightforward, and you can pick whatever size or capacity works best for you. Accessing the files is quick and easy thanks to the nippy 8-core CPU, 2.5 gig Ethernet, and the Ugreen NAS mobile app. Ugreen NAS also has a built-in security manager with advanced encryption, a firewall, and two-factor authentication to protect files from unauthorized access. You can also use RAID to enable redundancy in the event of a drive failure. There's even AI baked in that can help you sort your family photos and pets from any text and documents. Ugreen NAS is available on Amazon and the Ugreen web store. There's currently a full sale on right now. We can save up to 20%. Links to everything are located down below.
Next up, we have Horizon Forbidden West, and this game looks absolutely fantastic, and it goes to prove that you do not need ray tracing to make a game look good. But clearly Nvidia doesn't want people to think that, so that people can keep buying their new graphics cards. For the quality settings, we've gone for the very high preset, which is the highest quality settings you can have in this game. But believe it or not, all of these GPUs are actually capable of delivering solid frame rates. As far as the averages are concerned, the RTX 5060 8GB is comfortably ahead with 82 average FPS, around 10 FPS more than the B580. The RTX 5050 trails the B580 once again in this single player title, averaging just over 60 FPS. But more importantly, the B580 and the 5060 have higher 1% lows. With the 1% lows being above 60 FPS, it gives you a much smoother experience. Now, of course, you could just set the preset from the very high to the high preset with the RTX 5050, and you could probably claw a few more FPS back. But when the Arc B580 is the same price as the RTX 5050, you kind of start to wonder why bother going for that card. Because if you still want those high frame rates in multiplayer games, just get the RTX 5060. It costs around 10 to 15% more, but it gives you around 20 to 30% more performance. Next up is Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, another game that looks absolutely fantastic, and we've got this once again set to the very high preset. When it comes to the average frame rates, the B580 once again outperforms the RTX 5050 and is just behind the RTX 5060. They're more or less matching each other in this title. All three of these GPUs offer very similar 1% lows around the 48 to 50 mark, none of them really taking the lead here. It's a little bit disappointing, as I've seen with the 16GB GPUs when we did this video last time. They performed much better when they had that little bit more VRAM available. Although the Arc card does have a bit more VRAM, it's probably just not quite powerful enough to make full use of what it has to offer. Next up we have Returnal, and this is the first game we're going to enable some ray tracing. We've gone for the high preset, so not the epic preset, but the ray tracing is set to epic, as ray tracing kind of needs to be at the highest preset for it to look actually any good. Otherwise it can look a little bit fuzzy and weird. When it comes to the average frame rates though, the B580 is leagues ahead of the RTX 5050 in this title, averaging 83 FPS compared to 67. Once again, it's pretty close to the 5060, but the 1% lows are pretty disappointing across all three of these GPUs, with all of them averaging under 60 FPS. Of course, there is an easy fix for this, just turn off ray tracing, it's as simple as that. These cards aren't really designed for ray tracing. Even at 1080p, it puts a lot of strain on the GPU. Not to mention, ray tracing can actually put quite a strain on your CPU, so unless you're using a high-end CPU, like the 9800X3D that we are, you could actually see an even bigger deficit to your frame rates. Of course, we don't recommend pairing these CPU and GPU combinations. If you do want to see that video, we've got a whole video all about CPU and GPU combinations. Just click that link in the top right hand corner or check the video description. Next up is our first game that we're going to be showing that has ray tracing on by default. There is no way to turn off ray tracing in Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. That's just the way it goes. We've gone for the medium preset, and we do get a warning about VRAM requirements and exceeding the video memory allowance. There's a lot of things that can kind of contribute to this, and some things that can really affect what uses more VRAM. Even things like DLSS and even frame generation can use more VRAM, so be careful if you want to enable some of those things and maybe bump up the settings. If perhaps you are running an older GPU that just flat out refuses to run this game, maybe like an RX 5700 XT, probably a pretty good GPU performance-wise, but just does not work because it doesn't work with ray trace titles, then maybe one of these newer GPUs could be an option for you. Maybe you'll look at the Arc B580 or the RTX 5060. Again, if you want to spend £230, the Arc B580 makes more sense because it's just generally better performing in more titles, but the 5060 isn't that much more and it's just better than the 5050 in every way possible. Next up, we have another title which absolutely forces on ray tracing, and that is Doom: The Dark Ages. Of course, we won't be enabling path tracing, because that setting even brings an RTX 5090 to its knees, albeit at higher resolutions with higher settings, but path tracing can absolutely kill the performance of a GPU. Now when it comes to the settings for Doom the Dark Ages, we've gone for the medium preset, and as you can see here we have the texture pool size slider all the way to the far left, because we were getting warnings and the game was moaning about us that we were using too much video memory. I did the same settings for each GPU, even though the ARC card has more VRAM, to just try and keep things more consistent. But regardless of that setting, the ARC card is still using over 3GB of VRAM more than the Nvidia GPUs. Now performance-wise, it's not really helping the ARC card in any way whatsoever. It's around the same performance as the 5050. The 5060 is comfortably ahead by around 20 FPS or so, and it does give a smoother experience overall. Now the amount of VRAM doesn't always directly affect your performance. It can cause other things to happen, like textures to go missing, not loading in properly, and things just look a little bit weird, like we saw with the 4060 Ti 8GB when that released in Hogwarts Legacy a few years ago. Textures were just non-existent in some parts of the game. Then our final game we're going to take a look at is Cyberpunk 2077. We've set this to the RT medium preset, which basically means all of the other settings are set to high or ultra, and then the ray tracing, reflections, and shadows are set to a medium preset. So you're not just setting everything to medium with some ray tracing turned on. And as you probably could have guessed, the performance isn't fantastic. Bearing in mind this scene here, we're not even in the city where a lot is going on. We're in the middle of nowhere, we're in the desert, and we're only getting around about 50 to 70 average FPS across these three GPUs. Of course, the 5050 is struggling the most in this title, with the B580 proving to be quite a bit better and not far off the RTX 5060. Of course, I actually wouldn't recommend playing Cyberpunk with these settings. I'd much rather play at either high, very high, ultra, whatever the preset is, and disable ray tracing. So here's the takeaway. At 1080p, the RTX 5060 8GB clearly leads this group, averaging around 160 FPS with strong 1% lows at 115. The ARC B580 isn't far behind, performance is roughly on par with the RTX 5050, but it does come with 12GB of VRAM, which could help in heavier titles down the line and give you a little bit more longevity in the future. In terms of value, the 5060 comes in first, with the B580 in second, and the 5050 following in third place. So overall, the RTX 5060 is both the fastest and gives you the best cost per frame. Intel's ARC B580 is the more memory-rich option if you're looking for extra headroom. But one thing I was thinking is that Counter-Strike 2 may have skewed the results quite a bit. It's one of those titles where Nvidia cards just crush it, so the overall averages were being pulled up heavily in the 5060 and 5050's favour. To keep things kind of fair, I reran the averages across the 9 other games with CS2 removed, and they recalculated the cost per frame too. That gave a more balanced view. The RTX 5060 still leads, but the ARC B580 and 5050 come in a little bit closer. But this kind of thing really shows how the narrative can shift. If I did the same for Fortnite or Marvel as well, or any single game that favors one brand, I could completely change the outcome. So if I'm honest, this graph is kind of pointless, but I just wanted to add it in anyway. And remember, Intel's card does have 12GB of VRAM, which I can't help but stress, which could just age better in heavier titles and just give you more flexibility depending on what you're doing. For example, if you want to crank up those settings to an even higher preset, or you want to step things up from 1080p to 1440p, you will run out of VRAM much sooner. And we did actually see this the last time we used the RX 5060 in another video. Anyway guys, that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please click that like button, get yourself subscribed, and hopefully we can have more of these videos very, very soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.